batteries to power. Turbines to speed.
Ready to move out.
Before we start, I'd like to say something. There's no reason why you shouldn't have complete confidence in your chances to come out of this thing alive in one piece.
From coast to coast, from border to border, from one end to the other, and all points in between. The Classic Guitar Rock Podcast is on.
Yes! That's awesome!
We crank up and break down the great guitar-driven rock of the 70s and 80s, and you are invited to come along.
We got a full tank of gas, half a pack of cigarettes, it's dark, and we're wearing sunglasses.
Hit it.
And now your hosts, Jeremy and Jeff.
1/2 teaspoon for fast, effective relief.
It's time for the Classic Guitar Rock Podcast.
Welcome to the Classic Guitar Rock Podcast, episode 16 this week. Jeff, how are you?
I'm doing well, thank you. Well, given what's happening in Colorado, I can't say I'm doing 100%, but
rough week, and that was right in Boulder, wasn't it?
Yeah,
very,
Boulder.
Very sad when it hits close to home like that. So obviously, our thoughts are with folks in Boulder.
Yes, I'm happy to be here with you.
Yeah, we're happy to have you here. Now, you guys won't see this, but I'm going to ask Jeff to hold something up that he just showed me. Show me that again. Is that handy? He got a new toy. This is the exact type of thing that makes guitar players hate other guitar players. Look at that. He's holding up a beautiful Les Paul Standard. Is that brand new?
Yeah, this is brand new.
What do they call that finish?
This is Bourbon Burst.
Bourbon Burst. Yeah. Guys, if you cannot see it, if you're watching on YouTube, you can see the video. That is just a gorgeous guitar. And
know what? It came all set up, ready to go. I mean, I don't think I have to do really anything to it.
Well, let's be honest. You pay enough for those that they better play themselves when you get them, Jeff.
They better write some songs for me.
Totally. But that's a gorgeous guitar.
Thank you. And you too. How are you in Washington?
I'm doing well here. I don't have a new Les Paul, but yeah, things are well here. It's been kind of rainy and stuff here, but I'm looking forward to this episode today. This album I've been picking. The last few albums I've picked, this is one I picked. And the last few albums I've picked are ones that have been just a big part of my life from the time I was pretty young, just listening to these albums. So of course we'll be talking about the Eagles' Hotel California today. I'm going to save some of my observations till we actually get into it, but this will be interesting. I've listened to it with new ears, right? I haven't actually sat down to listen front to back to this album for probably 20, 25, 30 years. So I have some thoughts about this, and I'll be interested to get your thoughts too. I did want to thank, we mentioned last week that we have a new sponsor, and we heard their commercial last week. We'll hear it again this week. Braun and Jarvis Family Dentistry here in Spokane. And I just say that as another plug to invite anyone, if you're interested in sponsoring the podcast, just shoot us an email at classicguitarrock@mail.com. And again, I don't want to be making this a sales spiel, but podcasts are a great platform right now to advertise on. The bang for your buck that marketers get on podcasts is really amazing. So this is a great opportunity. So feel free to reach out to us for that. Or if you have suggestions for, show ideas or albums we should review or hate mail, any of that, send it out. We'd be happy to hear that. And I always forget to plug the fact that we do have a YouTube channel. We're on Twitter, we're on Facebook. So just find Classic Guitar Rock and reach out to us. Be awesome. Okay, so when we come back, we are going to talk about perhaps the biggest album of the 70s and actually one of the top 10 biggest albums of all time. It's Hotel California by the Eagles. All that when we come back.
Attention! If you live in Spokane, Washington, and have teeth, this message is for you. Braun and Jarvis Family Dentistry knows teeth. Incisors, bicuspids, canines, molars. No tooth is too big or too small.
I was delighted and impressed. So impressed, I bought the company.
With Braun and Jarvis, you'll have the sweetest grill in the inland Northwest. And let's be honest, nobody wants a funky grill. Braun and Jarvis Family Dentistry. 509-464-2391. That's 509-464-2391. Braun and Jarvis Family Dentistry. Quality dentistry that doesn't suck.
Welcome back to the Classic Guitar Rock Podcast, and a shout out to our musical director, Jeff, who created this awesome bumper that you're listening to. This is phenomenal. This is great.
Thank you.
It's awesome. And so that's why Jeff gets paid the big bucks on this show. I don't know if you guys are aware of the massive salary that Jeff is pulling down for this show. The reality is none of us have made any money, but that's okay. But no,
that is money anyway.
What is money? That's right. That's right.
Time is money.
Time is money. Speaking of money, speaking of time, wasted time, for instance, one of the tracks on this album we'll talk about, we are unpacking Hotel California. And I have no idea. We have not said a word to each other about this album. I have no idea what Jeff's thoughts are on this album. I think we have to talk about the Eagles a little bit. Have you seen the history of the Eagles? Came out a couple of years ago, Jeff, that like 3-hour documentary.
I believe I did.
I've
seen a few.
Yeah, that's me. I've seen, I haven't watched that thing in its entirety. And I'll tell you one of the problems I had with it. You know, they always say there's your side, there's my side, and then there's the truth, right? My problem with that movie is it seemed to have really paint Don Felder as a bad guy. And I have to say, and this is something that I've watched a lot of interviews. I don't want to say I'm an expert, but I've watched a lot of interviews and really have kind of followed Don Felder. And I got to say, just so my biases are out there, I'm a Don Felder fan. I like Don Felder. And every interview I've seen when he's given an opportunity to badmouth Henley and Fry, he doesn't. You know, and you can tell whether it's with these, if he's on with Stern or Artie Lang or anyone who's interviewing him, they are trying to get him to badmouth Henley and Fry like they have badmouthed him, by the way, and he doesn't bite. I mean, I agree. He seems like a really classy guy. And so I'm just going to say out of the gate, there's my bias. I tend to choose Felder's side. And the reason, I don't want this to be a whole dramatic thing about the infighting in the band, but that's part of their history. And in fact, you look at how great a band they were. Hotel California was their 5th studio album. And my point is, how many total studio albums did they have? They had this one, and then they had The Long Run. And then they didn't have another studio album until like 2008 with that Long Road Out of Eden. Did I miss any? So in their whole career, they had 7 studio albums? And I think much of that is because, and Felder put it this way, the Eagles were a band full of big talent and big egos. And that's exactly what it was, right? No one can question the talent of the Eagles. And I would say, people might push back, people might argue, but I would say that the Eagles might be the best American band. Is that crazy to say?
The best.
The best.
I read a quote like, one of the most talented best bands who are also the most hated.
Oh, totally.
Right. The bipolarness of this whole thing has got me all messed up. I'm not gonna lie.
And when you throw out the Eagles,
yeah,
you will hear people that just hate the Eagles. You know, when you see the posts about what's a famous band that you hate? Oh yeah, the Eagles get thrown out there. A lot.
And I have to say, one of my favorite movies, top 10 of all time, The Big Lebowski. The dude.
Yeah.
He's in the taxi, the cab. Guy turns on the Eagles. He's like, man, can you turn this off? I hate the Eagles. I had a really bad day and I hate the Eagles. And he kicks him out of the cab.
Exactly. And
so that just tells you right there. It's
totally.
It's in the pop culture.
That is the perfect example, right? You love them or you hate them. And let me give you, okay, this is why. And having said that, Don Henley has one of the most distinctive, coolest voices. He really does. But man, I hate that guy. I do. I mean, here is, I'm just going to read you a quote from Don Henley. Okay. And this is why he's seen as such a pompous, arrogant jerk nozzle, right? Okay. So he's talking, and this will talk about the album too. So this will kill two birds with one stone. So here's a quote. He's talking about the themes of the songs on the album Hotel California. They're the same themes that run through all of our work. Loss of innocence, the cost of naivete, the perils of fame, of excess, exploration of the dark underbelly of the American dream, idealism realized and idealism thwarted, illusion versus reality, the difficulties of balancing loving relationships and work, trying to square the conflicting relationship between business and art, the corruption in politics, the fading away of the 60s dream of peace, love, and understanding. This guy sounds like a blast at a party, doesn't he? But then it goes on. This is a concept album. There's no way to hide it, but it's not set in the Old West, the cowboy thing, you know. It's more urban this time. It's our bicentennial year, it was 1976. It's our bicentennial year, you know. The country is 200 years old. So we figured, since we are the Eagles and the eagle is our national symbol, that we were obliged to make some kind of a little bicentennial statement using California as a microcosm of the whole United States, or the whole world, if you will, and try to wake people up and say, we've been okay so far for 200 years, but we're going to have to change if we're going to continue to be around. Okay, here's the perfect example of an entertainer, of a musician that obviously thinks he's pretty dang important, right? And that's not to say, okay, music is powerful. Music is super powerful. And this album is powerful. The songs like Hotel California, the songs like Last Resort, they are powerful and they're very thought-provoking. But at the same time, man, he just gives me the biggest rash in the world. He drives me crazy. And that's that whole dichotomy you talk about, where on the one hand, they just drive you crazy. And then on the other hand, it's like, this is really good stuff.
Yeah. I mean, we'll get into it. But on my notes, I've got Felder, Joe Walsh equals heroes of the band.
That is so funny you said that.
Coming from a guitar player, classic rock, and also stylistically and
right.
And personality wise, if those guys weren't in the band, they probably would just be a sort of sappy kind of, and they were talented and they are talented, and we'll get into it, but yeah. I think they would have been would continue to be this sort of like poppy country rock kind of sappy thing.
Completely agree. And in fact, as I'm reading the quote, I'm thinking, thank goodness for Walsh and Felder. Otherwise, because those guys, they just wanted to rock. Okay, that was their whole thing. They were both phenomenal guitar players and they just wanted to rock. And it's interesting when you talk about the whole drama, okay? Bernie Leadon. Now, the history is really interesting. Felder and Leadon knew each other before Leadon knew any of the other guys. So they were in the same high school in Florida. They played together. And then Leadon had found his way to California. Glenn Frey had headed to California from Detroit. Henley from Texas. Randy Meisner from Nebraska. So all these guys in the late 60s wound up in California. So Leadon, Frey, Henley, Meisner, they all had played with Linda Ronstadt. So they were the Stone Pony Band. They were backing up Linda Ronstadt. And then that's how the Eagles happened. You know, they had played together. There was some chemistry there. They went to England, recorded their first album. And I think on that first album, they had like Already Gone and no, not Already Gone. Take It Easy.
Witchy Woman.
And Witchy Woman. Okay. And those were huge songs. And that first album was very successful. And they were kind of this, and here's what's ironic is they were kind of referred to as a California band, California rock. Well, none of them were from California, right? But they were kind of called California rock. Mm-hmm. Great album. You get the second album, somewhere in there between the second and third, they canned Glenn Johns, who had been their producer. In the meantime, they had the James Gang and sometimes Joe Walsh solo opening for them, or they'd been playing. Maybe they were opening for the James Gang. I don't know, but they had known Joe Walsh, and they liked Joe Walsh's producer, Bill Simzik. So when they fired Johns, they bring in Simzik, I think right in the middle of On the Border, somewhere in there, there's a change. And then in there, Felder talks about how he and Bernie were good friends and they'd been in touch, and he had met the other guys because he'd go visit them when they were nearby or whatever. And so they all knew each other, and they had Felder come in and play on something on the Border, and they really liked him. And the next day, Fry called him and asked him if he'd like to join. And so he became a member in between On the Border and One of These Nights. So Felder plays on One of These Nights. Ledden left. And from what I hear, Ledden was not into the drama, because even back then, it was the Henley Fry show, right? They kind of were the ramrods, and Ledden left. Meisner stuck around through Hotel California. He left. He got sick of it, and then down the road they canned Felder, and that's a whole nother story. But they bring Felder in.
And can I just say Felder from Gainesville, Florida, right?
Yes.
Where Tom Petty.
Yes.
Apparently he was Tom Petty's first guitar teacher, which is, who knows how long that lasted, but Exactly. It's a fun little tidbit of info.
He taught Petty guitar. That's awesome. Yeah.
And I just, Joe Walsh is my guy.
You're a big Joe Walsh fan.
For many reasons, but he also came to Caribou Ranch, which the first album that was ever recorded there. Caribou Ranch was outside of Boulder, in a little town called Nederland, which my kids and I go and do snowboarding as we speak. We go there, and Barnstorm recorded the first album at this Caribou Ranch. So he's a Colorado guy as well.
Yeah, that's great. Didn't he live in Colorado or have a place in Colorado or something?
I'm pretty sure. I think he was living here while he was making the album.
And one thing I didn't. No, not that it matters, but just an interesting tidbit. Both Joe Walsh and Don Henley had flings with Stevie Nicks. So there you go.
Oh, I didn't know that.
They got that on their resume too. So, okay. So where were we going here? Felder comes in after One of These Nights, which is a great album too, by the way. After One of These Nights is done, Bernie Ledden leaves. Okay. And at that point, they bring Joe Walsh in, and Felder was thrilled because he and Walsh were friends, and they'd been touring together, not only just with the Eagles, but even Felder would get together with Walsh, and they'd do jams and stuff. And so he was super stoked about Walsh coming in.
Not Henley.
Yeah. The thing is, from what I hear, is they wanted to become more of a rock band than a country band. And so with you got Felder in, and that brought some more rock elements for One of These Nights. And then you bring Walsh in, and it's like the circle is now complete, right? You got Felder, you got Walsh, who are both just incredible. And so they're going to make this album. And
I'm surprised Felder and Walsh at one point just said, you know what, we're going to just go on and do our own thing. And it would have been, things happen for whatever reasons they happen. Right. But
right.
Why, but I wonder who wanted to be a rock band when you say that, because exactly. I don't think it was Henley. We'll talk about this album.
Yeah.
And some of the soft, sappy strings.
Oh, and that's
all Henley, right? That's all.
And it's funny you say that, because when I listened to it, I remember it just being much more of a rockin' album. It really isn't. I mean, you got Hotel California, which is pretty rockin'. You got Fast Lane, and you got Victim of Love. Everything else is slow, sappy. I'm not saying bad. I mean, New Kid in Town is a great song, but it's definitely light adult contemporary fare.
Yeah, I wonder if we're going to get some listeners that are like, what
you're doing the
classic rock?
Yeah.
And that's the bipolarness of it all.
Totally. That's a perfect word for it. It's totally bipolar, bipolar. I love the story of Hotel California, of how Felder, sitting on the couch in his rental home on the beach in California, just comes up with this little guitar part that we all know and love as Hotel California. And he runs into his daughter's room at the time because his daughter, his 1-year-old daughter, slept in his little recording room. But when she wasn't sleeping, he was in there recording, right? So he runs in, grabs a little tape recorder, records the part so he won't forget it. And then later, sends it off to along like 16 songs. He had come up with like 16 songs that he sent off to Felder and Fry, later for when they were going to get together. And as they're getting together to start talking about the album, Henley says, I like that. He called it a Mexican reggae song. I like that Mexican reggae thing. He said, oh, yeah, okay. So they start working on it. And according to Felder, the harmonized guitar parts, all the signature guitar things you think of, even during the verses. By the way, listen to this song on headphones. At one point, I didn't have the energy to do it this time, but I can remember at one point listening to this and actually on a piece of paper, writing down all the different guitars. And I remember counting 12 guitars on this song, right?
Oh my God.
Because you think about it, you got the 12-string figure playing the riff. You got the Telecaster clicky part, all on the left side. You've got an acoustic just strumming along. You've got, during the verse, harmonized guitar parts doing the little, there's so much guitar stuff going on. This is a brilliant song to listen to in headphones. It's super big.
I think all the other two you mentioned, Victim and Life in the Fast Lane as well. If you listen to headphones, I had it down. The mix.
Oh yeah,
on this was just fantastic.
It's incredible, and you get
right.
I can't remember if it was Bill Simzik or maybe it was Irving Azoff, however it pronounces his name, right? The big guy with the record company. One of them said, this is perhaps the best guitar duo ever. And I'm like, he may have a point, because these guys are both virtuosos and yet different styles. I could be wrong, but when I hear, I think I can absolutely tell, oh, that's Walsh or that's Felder. I could be wrong, but I think I have an idea. You probably even more than me.
I mean, Joe Walsh to me has such a great, unique style.
Yeah.
His bends,
of course, when you hear Slide, it's probably Joe,
Yep.
But they just were a great team. He recorded this Hotel California, the ideas, what would become Hotel California. And so Henley, with a little help from Fry, they go and write the lyrics. They go in to record it. And the first thing they found out is it was in a bad key. Okay. Cause it was written in E minor, in E. That was way too high. Felder said Henley had to sing it way high. It wouldn't work. So they wound up going to B minor. So that's how many steps? That's quite a step down from E to B minor, right?
Mm-hmm.
So they changed the key and they did that. And then another time, I think the first thing was they recorded it and the tempo was wrong. It's either too slow or too fast. Then it was the key was the wrong key. So it took 3 different times till they got the music right. And they did the music. Well, it comes time to do the solo. And in Felder's mind, it's going to be he and Joe cutting heads in the studio, right? Like they always would do on stage. They love doing that, right? They would just be out there and they just let it fly, And so they get out and start just doing their thing. And Henley goes, wait, hold on. That's not how it is on the tape you sent. You got to do it like it's on the tape. Felder's like, I recorded that 1.5 years ago. I don't remember what I did on the tape. He says, you got to do what's on the tape. So he calls his housekeeper, who's on the other side of the country, has her rummage through his cassettes and all his tapes and play it over the phone for him and Joe. And so they basically reconstructed the harmony guitar parts and that signature lick, that first lick, that very first lick that comes in, they had to reconstruct all of that for the actual recording.
Wow.
That's amazing. And it's magic. I mean, that song is magic. It's been played to death. I think that's why a lot of people hate the Eagles, is they feel like it's been crammed down our throats. But it is a magic song for sure. It's awesome.
I read that, I can't remember how many takes, 50 like overdubs and recordings and different times they had to like deal with it, right? Versus like Victim of Love was apparently just like mostly a live thing, right?
Yeah.
So, but you can tell.
Yeah.
I mean, for me, there's so many, it's such an iconic guitar song, and there's not a lot of songs that are so iconic that guitarists can really appreciate that also have become huge sort of songs in the fabric of our culture, like Freebird, is
totally one. Everyone knows Freebird.
Stairway to Heaven, even though it's been overplayed, is another one, even though it's not. But those awesome guitar tunes.
Yeah.
But yet, my mom probably, knows all of them.
Totally. And the thing about the Eagles, with a few exceptions, right? The thing that was very frustrating about the Eagles is the level of execution was so high that for a musician trying to learn songs, you just like, no, we're not going to try to do an Eagles song, right? Because you got this production that's flawless. You got these vocal performances that are flawless. It's like, no, we're not even going to try and mess with playing. I mean, maybe we could do Already Gone, but try to do Hotel California or so. It's like, no way. But it's that big. And I think you're right. It's become such a part of the fabric of pop culture or whatever that I think some people are just sick of it. And I think a lot of the reason people are sick of the Eagles is probably Don Henley, right? They're just, but anyways, speaking of Victim of Love, this is an interesting story too. The idea was Felder was going to sing a song. And here's the thing. You're in a band with Fry and Henley and Meisner. What people don't realize is Felder's a singer. Felder's a good singer. In any other band, he would be considered a good singer, right? But because he's surrounded by Felder and Fry and Meisner, Walsh isn't known to be a great singer, but he's got a very distinct voice.
I love his voice.
I love his voice too. So Pretty Maids, it wouldn't work with anyone else singing it, right? In the City would not work with anyone else singing it.
And he can do a ballad like Pretty Maids and make it not sappy in a way. I don't know. Exactly, it's great
because he brings an earthiness, right? The fact that he's not a crooner, right? He's got a real earthy kind of voice and delivery. It works. Well, Felder's a good singer too, not in the league with Henley, or Meisner's a phenomenal singer too, but he's a good singer. And the point was he wanted to sing a song, and his song that he was going to sing was Victim of Love. He wrote everything, wrote all the music, I think wrote most of the lyrics, maybe not all the lyrics. And the idea was that was going to be his song. So they laid it down and the tracks was all there. It was ready for the lead vocals. He's out to dinner one night with Irving Azoff. And Irving at the end of the dinner mentions, oh, by the way, Don went ahead and put the vocals on that song. And Felder, he was mad. He was upset. His feelings were hurt. But he said in hindsight, I mean, he's like, I get it, right? We got Don Henley. Why wouldn't we use Don Henley if we got Don Henley, right? That was his point. But the original thing was he was supposed to sing it. Right.
Sure.
And later on in the long run, he does the King of Hollywood song. If you remember that song on the long run. And again, yeah, Felder's not in the same league with Don Henley, but he's not a bad singer. And his whole point was, that was it. I wanted to sing a song. And if you listen to Hotel California, okay, Fry does one song. He does New Kid. Walsh does Pretty Maids. And Meisner does Try to Love Again. So that's 3 songs. Every other song is Henley.
There's a lot of egos in music, as we know, with musicians.
Right.
But it would have been nice if Henley probably said, "Hey, man, I think this is a better fit for the song if I do it. And here, let's try it out." Right.
Right.
Versus whoever you said at dinner told them, "Hey, by the way,
he just did it." And
the guy in the mountain,
exactly
checked out your vocals.
and I think that's not the only time something like that had happened.
I'm sure.
And Fry and Henley were really, and they'll even tell you in interviews, yeah, we were the leaders of the band. We thought we were the leaders of the band. And that was the thing that rubbed Felder the wrong way. And here's the thing, not Walsh, to my understanding, not Walsh, but Felder, when he came in, was a full partner of the band. So he owned just as much of the band as Fry and Henley and Meisner and Ledden at the time. So he was brought in as a full member. Then Ledden and Meisner left. Felder still got a share of the band. Now I'm not sure if that was the case with Walsh. It definitely wasn't the case with Timothy B. Schmidt when they brought him in for the long run. But
no, it wasn't. Yeah.
And Felder was actually in the organization was the chief financial officer of the band. And in the 90s, he starts poking around and wanting to say, guys, what's the deal here? He's thinking they're all getting an equal cut, only to find out that Henley and Fry have been getting way more money than he and Walsh were. And he and Walsh were friends, but he was a little disappointed in Walsh because Walsh didn't want to ruin the good thing he had. And maybe that's the approach Felder should have taken. I don't know. But because let's face it, they're all making plenty of money.
But you didn't write Hotel California.
Exactly. And that's what he said. Their biggest song, okay, Hotel California. And the show, to me, is Felder and Walsh. That's who I want to go see. That's the draw to me. And yet, you get this whole thing, and you've probably heard there's the recording of that last show they did in Long Beach, where there's audio of Walsh and Felder both just cussing each other out, saying, after the show, I'm going to kick your, I'm going to punch you right in the
Walsh and Felder?
I'm sorry. Fry and Felder. And Felder. Oh yeah. Walsh and Felder got along great, right?
Yeah, okay.
Everyone gets along with Joe Walsh. Come on. If you can't get along with Joe Walsh, that's your problem, right? But in all of this going down, Felder, he eventually got fired. They pushed him out, right? They pushed him out. Felder filed a lawsuit, which eventually was settled out of court. And anytime he's asked about it, he's saying, I legally can't talk about the specifics. But I think you could say Felder won, because from everything that appears, there's still a lot of bitterness from Fry and Henley there at the end towards Felder after he settled out of court. So I don't know what the settlement was, but Felder seems like he was happy with it. And they were mad that he published this book, and they sued him. So they delayed him publishing this book, but he finally won that suit and could publish his book. So they were really mad at Felder in the 2000. I don't think the settlement actually even was resolved until like 2006 or something crazy. So this is, anytime you got legal entanglements in your favorite band, it's not good, right?
I mean, we got the band.
Yes. Yeah.
Levon Helm and Robbie and the rest of the people, right?
Yeah.
But anyway, before I forget, I wanted to one of the touching things to me about Hotel California as a kid was watching that live video where Felder's got the double necked SG. Yeah. And that whole thing is amazing.
And Walsh has the Telecaster, and
and they trade, and Walsh is making these hilarious faces. He's got the bandana, that to me, I mean, it's hard to find actually the original.
It is now
taking it down.
And that's and another thing. Okay.
Yeah. He's a blocker.
And here's what pisses me off. Okay?
We don't want to make this too much.
I know. I don't want to beat up Henley, but here's the thing. You watch Rick Beato, You ever watch his? Okay, he's talked about Henley. And here's the thing, right? Guitar lesson. Okay, a lot of YouTubers will go out and teach a guitar lesson. Now, in my mind, teaching a guitar lesson or using a bumper music from an artist, in my mind, that's promoting the artist. I would want that. To me, if I was an artist, I would love people playing 10-second snippets of my music. I would love people giving guitar lessons of my music. It's all promoting my music. But Don Henley and the Eagles are one of the worst as far as you couldn't even get them on. They've only been streaming for the last couple of years. You couldn't even stream Eagles stuff. You can't find YouTube stuff of the Eagles because they block everything.
I mean, I could be wrong, but I think it goes even farther, meaning, Rick, go ahead and use our song for educational purposes.
Right.
We'll just monetize it, so we'll actually make a little money. Rick's okay with that.
Right.
It's
right.
They're actually like saying, you can't, even if we're going to make money, you can't use it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh yeah. That's his big rants.
Crazy.
You know?
It's a win-win. If Rick is doing a lesson where he's dissecting an Eagles song, yeah, he makes a little money, but the band could be making money. But you're right. They won't even let that. I'll give you an example. I have on the YouTube channel, my most popular video is a guitar lesson for Huey Lewis, The Power of Love. Okay. So I do a little lesson showing
I remember that
song.
It's a great riff.
And it's a shared, and there was no process. It was just, I got this little notice that said this revenue is being shared with the artist. And I'm like, that's cool. That's the only one they've ever done it on. Every other video where I've done a lesson, probably because my tiny little channel doesn't bring any attention. If I had hundreds of thousands or millions of subscribers like Rick Beato does, it might be different. But that's the only one on my channel that I have to share revenue with. But you're right, with the Eagles, I mean, they just shut it down. They don't let anyone use any of their music at all.
Sure seems silly. Okay, one more fact that I thought was interesting. Joe Walsh was asked to join. We talked about Humble Pie, right? 2-3 shows ago,
right?
But Steve Marriott asked him to move to England and join his band when Frampton left.
I did not know that. That's amazing.
He declined and came to California.
Went to California. Yeah. Where is he from? Is he from the Detroit area too? Where was Joe Walsh from?
I believe. Yeah, he grew up or was born in Kansas, but I believe he spent his time in Ohio. His early age. Yeah.
Yeah. He's great. He's a great guy. One of the things that again, I don't want to just beat up on Henley, but one of the things too, that depending on this is not a political show at all. We don't want to talk about politics, but one of the things too was Fry and Henley were both very politically active, and Felder and Walsh weren't. They're just like, we're going to play a show, whatever. And that caused some friction too, because they wanted them to be more on board with their politics, and then they weren't. That just wasn't what they weren't into politicians. Felder's point was, if we were going to play a fundraiser, I'd rather do it to help kids or cure cancer than a politician, right? Which I probably tend to agree with that. But that caused friction too among the band. But anyways, there's a whole litany of things we could talk about in terms of the drama. I don't know if we want to go through every single song, but I do want to get your high points of this album. Jeff, what do you think? What as you listen to it, what songs really jump out at you and why?
Of course, Hotel California, because just of the dueling solos, the production, the whole thing. I mean, it's iconic. We know, but Life in the Fast Lane is such a killer riff. I have that as my number 2.
Yeah.
Joe Walsh wrote the riff. Again, the mixing, the panning of those delayed guitars. It's just a great, great tune. There's a lot of layering going on. Victim of Love. I love it. I'm a classic rock guy, right? So the other songs aren't bad. They're just different.
They're different.
They're slower. They're sappier to me.
Yeah.
I don't think they actually fit with the rest of the album, or vice versa. It depends on what
or the other
that we're going, right?
Yeah. And I know one thing that I always thought was kind of cool. And I had this, my brother bought this album. It came out in like December of 76. My brother must have bought it in the spring of 77 because it was pretty. I remember when he bought it, we were hearing New Kid in Town on the radio, right? So it was, while it was still a current. One of the things I always thought was kind of cool is you'd listen to Wasted Time at the end of side one, which is a very, lyrically, and to the quote, the quote we read earlier about it being a concept album, it really kind of is. You got Wasted Time, which is a very kind of melancholy song. They do the song, the side ends, and then at the beginning of side two, you got this reprise of the orchestrated da, 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 da. I just always kind of thought that was interesting just because it was like a very orchestral approach.
My number 4, actually, because I love Joe, was Pretty Maids All in a Row.
I love that song.
But the chords are great. I think his voice and delivery is awesome. Bob Dylan basically said it could be one of the best songs ever, which I thought was kind of, yeah. I read that quote.
Yeah.
And it's really poignant. If you read the lyrics,
it's a beautiful song. Yeah. And again, and that's the thing about this album is it's not a happy album. It's not a happy album. The whole themes, this whole California as a metaphor of, and here's one of the things that makes me rashy when I think about it is, Henley's very preachy, and yet he's the epitome of someone living the California lifestyle, right? He's a multimillionaire living in mansions, and he makes this album decrying, how bad all of this is. And so, well, it hasn't hurt you any, has it? Right. Which is kind of funny. But the whole theme of the album is it's not a happy album.
Yeah.
Right. And between, you got Wasted Time, you've got Last Resort, which on the one hand, it's a beautiful song. I love the song. A lot of meaning to it, a lot of things to think about in that song. But yeah, very, very mellow. I mean, the most of the album is really mellow, right?
Could have been great to have all the rockers on one side,
yeah,
and all the other songs on the other side.
Yeah, for sure.
But I would never have flipped over the record. I would have just left it on side A.
Exactly. You never play both sides. One thing I meant to say this at the beginning is right after this album, so I think it was in 77, they released Greatest Hits Volume 1, 71 to 75, the Greatest Hits Volume 1. And the band was against it. They thought, it's nothing but a big old money grab. Why are you guys doing this? Well, then that album went on to become the second highest selling album of all time. Second only to Michael Jackson's Thriller. Best selling greatest hits album ever. The first album to ever become platinum was Eagles' Greatest Hits Volume 1. And I've heard, I didn't know if you knew this. There's research that backs this up, Jeff. If you leave a cassette in your car for more than 5 years, it will actually turn into Eagles' Greatest Hits Volume 1.
I think I'm correct in saying Hotel California in the US sold more than Thriller.
That could very well be,
but not worldwide.
Exactly. Yeah. And so these are worldwide numbers I'm talking about, but both Greatest Hits Volume 1 and Hotel California are in the top 10 of all time.
Definitely.
Sales. But we talked about Last Resort. What about Try to Love Again? Randy Meisner. I love that song too.
It's a good one. I like it. I think it's great that Henley and Fry let someone else sing.
Exactly. One of the big bones of contention for Meisner leaving was, up until this album, their biggest hit was Take It to the Limit, sung by Meisner. I think I'm correct on that. If you know I'm wrong, let me know, but I think I'm correct on that.
Up until you said before, up until this album?
Yes, up until Hotel California, I think that had been their biggest song. definitely a huge hit, a song you have to play live, right? It's one of your biggest hits. You have to play. Well, Meisner had just unbelievable stage fright, which seems amazing, but the guy suffered from just crazy stage fright. And there were some nights that he just did not want to sing that song. And of course, that was often their last song. That was their killer song. We're going to finish with Take It to the Limit, baby. And there were some nights where he just couldn't do it. And one night in particular, he just said, I can't do this. And it was like they were going to beat him up if he didn't sing it. You're going to sing this song. That's our number one song. So Fry and Henley are like, and he finally he couldn't do it anymore. And he left.
Wow.
Try to Love Again, a great song. Pretty Maids, a great song. But I agree with you. Hotel California, my 3 songs are the rockers. Hotel California, Life in the Fast Lane is number 2, and Victim of Love is number 3. That's my top 3. One interesting thing on Wasted Time, it always comes back to this with me. It's stereo separation, right? If you listen to Wasted Time, there's some kind of cool little guitar noodling that's all on the right side. And then most of your strings and orchestra stuff is on the left side. And it's just kind of interesting to hear that in the headphones. There's this whole album is full of subtle little things that you might not notice if you're just blasting it through your stereo. So it's cool to listen. Did you see the things about the problems they had with Black Sabbath during the
Yes. Yeah. It was during what song? The
Last Resort.
Last Resort.
Yeah.
I love that. I think that's just so.
Tell us what happened there.
I mean, Sabbath was recording. This was in
Technical Ecstasy,
Miami, I think.
Yeah,
right?
Miami. Yeah,
because they recorded the album in Miami and LA, and in Miami because the producer, what was his name?
Bill Simzik. Oh yeah, this is interesting.
Was afraid of being on the fault line.
Yeah, he didn't want to be
falling into the ocean. So they go to Miami, and Sabbath is recording, their album next door, and we're so loud they couldn't get the tracks. They couldn't record.
They said they had to redo Last Resort like 3 times.
I love it.
Too much sound bleeding in from Black Sabbath.
Now, that could have been an SNL skit, right?
Totally.
And Henley and
Henley's probably got veins coming out of his neck, and he's wanting to fight someone.
Was that Ozzy? Was he?
It would have been Ozzy. Oh yeah, that would have been Ozzy. And of course, they 76. All would have just been completely out of it on coke. But
come on, Don.
Yeah.
It's rock and roll.
It's rock and roll, Don. But I just imagine, did they talk to each other? Did the bands come out and say, dude, we're trying to record, turn down, and it was, that just seems so funny to me, but that was funny.
So did you read the quote by Fry on that song?
No, let me hear.
Last Resort. He said it was the first time that Don took it upon himself to write an epic story. And we were already starting to worry about the environment. I don't know what that. We're constantly screwing up paradise, and that was the point of the song. And that at some point there's going to be no more new frontiers. Right. I mean, we're putting garbage into space now.
Yeah, and this kind of goes to that whole preachy thing, right? Is here's a song lamenting basically the settlement of the frontier, the westward expansion, from Providence, it's whole talking about the whole westward expansion. Let's move into Colorado. Let's move into California and build these beautiful places. And so he's lamenting all that as he's sitting in his mansion in LA. That's the whole thing that smacks of, that's what irritates me about Henley. The song itself is a very deep song. There's a lot there that I think is a good thing for us to think about. But at the same time, here's a guy that's kind of the epitome of the LA lifestyle. Don't bite the hand that feeds you, buddy. I mean, that's kind of the way I see it, And yeah, because that song talks about rich men came and raped the land, putting up the ugly boxes, the houses for people to buy and all of that. And that's the whole point of this anti-development thing, which I get, right? There's some valid concerns there, but at the same time, that doesn't keep them from having their Hollywood mansions and all of that.
I mean, just to play devil's advocate, that's a hard, I guess the point is, was he sincere? Right.
Right.
And if you're sincere and you make money, can you live in a mansion? Even if it goes against what you just wrote about, even if you truly believe what you just wrote about.
Right. I don't know.
Or do you live like a, true artist?
Yeah. And that's the thing, right? You remember the Phil Collins back in the late 80s wrote that song, Another Perfect Day in Paradise, or Another Day in Paradise. And it's a song about the homeless, right? And I remember he got some bad press because, he had just made this song about the homeless, pointing to the plight of the homeless. And then there's a story in the news about how he had called the cops on some homeless people that had come to his house, right? So it's that whole do as I say, not as I do, and that's a common thing. I mean, we see it with politicians, we see it with celebrities. So that will always be the case. And I think that's some of the distaste people have, not just for Henley, but for sometimes just celebrities in general. One interesting thing is, do you remember this? They won for Song of the Year for the Grammys, at the end of 70 or in 76 or 77, whenever the Grammys were held. But they didn't win Album of the Year. Do you remember who won Album of the Year that year?
Fleetwood Mac,
Rumors. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So think about that year. Think about how good music was that year.
Unbelievable.
That Hotel California didn't win.
Yeah.
That's pretty good. So a lot in this album, brilliant moments. I mean, overall, production wise, from a production standpoint, it's a beautiful album. I mean, all the way through, it's a beautiful album. It has its moments, some rocking moments. We both talked, I think we both like it for the same reason. It's Felder and Walsh. That's the stuff we like.
I mean, specific to what we talk about and this podcast. Yeah, of course.
For sure.
Have you listened to the 40th anniversary version of this album?
No. What have they done on that?
There's just a bunch of live tracks.
Interesting.
Not all the live tracks are actually from the album, but the live tracks are from 76 and 77. 76 mostly. There's a 2000. And so these are different than from the Eagles live album that came out around 80, right? 79, 80. Must be different versions, or they probably. Yeah, the live tracks are from 76.
Oh, okay, cool. Awesome.
And it's really cool. We talked about all the edits, and people have complained, or at least had comments about the production and the overdubbing and all that. But yet, when you listen to some of these live tracks, it's pretty. They're good players.
They bring it totally, and that's the thing.
Singers.
I don't know if you've seen the footage of the thing at the Forum from here a year or two ago with Vince Gill and Deacon Fry. Have you seen any of that footage?
I think I have.
It sounds really good. I mean, it really does. I mean, whether you love the Eagles or not, even the Hell Freezes Over from back in '94. I watched that on PBS when it was new. The guys are consummate. They're pros. I mean, they just really are. They bring it. And Vince Gill, I'm a huge Vince Gill fan. I mean, he's one of the best guitar players, regardless of genre. The guy's an animal. Great singer. Super talented guy, and just seems like a good down-to-earth guy. So, I mean, I couldn't think of a better person for them to bring in to help with that. So it's great. And I'm like you. It's what's the word you keep using? Bipolar. That's exactly my feelings about the Eagles. So much I love about them, so much that just frustrates the crap out of me. But this is a good album. I even went back, Jeff, over the last couple of days, and I've listened to The Long Run. I've gone back and listened to the whole first album. They have a huge footprint. And I kind of made this point at the beginning, and I don't think I ever finished it. The fact that it's 4, 5, depending on who all's in, you got 5 huge talents, 5 huge egos. The fact that over the course of their years, they only had 6 or 7 studio albums is really a shame, because I'm sure we could have got a lot of great stuff from these guys. So that's kind of a shame. All right. Well, any other thoughts on Hotel California? It reminds me, Jeff, we should do a Joe Walsh album. So
yeah,
I'll let you decide which one we want to do. Thanks to everyone for listening. We appreciate it. We are doing well, surprisingly so. We're getting a lot of listens, so we appreciate that. Please subscribe, follow. If you could go out and give us a rating, hopefully a positive rating, give us a rating, leave a review, email us, classicguitarrock@mail.com, and we will see you on our next episode. Jeff, take care, and we will see you next time.
Keep rocking.
Thanks for listening to the Classic Guitar Rock Podcast. Please like, subscribe, and share. You can email us at classicguitarrock@mail.com. We'll see you for the next episode of the Classic Guitar Rock Podcast.